morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ife Akinsheye Damon, and I am here this morning to talk about my doctoral research on community-based learning. More specifically, I'm focused on analyzing the barriers to implementing it at the high school level in New York City public schools. So I just want to tell you a little bit about myself and the background and how I came to decide to do my research in this area. I am a mom of 4 and a grandma of 2, and my children, honestly, I know it sounds cheesy, but they really were my motivation to even getting into education. I came into education to change it, to make the world a better place. So I know it sounds cliche, but that's still my mission to this day. I'm also an ovarian cancer survivor. Thank you. Yes. And I'm also, in addition, I'm an education consultant, but I'm also a certified life coach, and I just recently started selling the art that I was making for myself when I was going through chemotherapy. I started making my own art and just recently started selling it.
Nice.
Thank you. My trade is education. I've been in education for about 20 years, and I have been recognized as a highly effective teacher in the evaluation system. I started right here in Atlanta Public Schools at the high school level, South Atlanta High School. In fact, I created the South Atlanta High School Health and Medical Sciences Academy, which turned into a school. I didn't leave that school though, because I didn't have the credentials at the time, but I did do that, and so I'm very proud about that. And it was even community-based centered mindset even back then. I am currently in New York City. I did teach in New York City Department of Education. As of October last year, I did stop. I finished up my dissertation, my doctoral research in June, so so just a few things just about me. Since the pandemic, a lot of these things are just since cancer, honestly, being diagnosed with cancer. I was on a national press panel with the Secretary of Education. I was recognized by Time Magazine as an American education hero. I was also interviewed in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and several other publications, and also wrote my own op-ed about community-based learning in the 74 million. I was born and raised on the principles of Kwanzaa and Nguzo Saba, which is a very unity-centered, community-centered, Ubuntu, Sankofa mindset. And so these are the things that have informed who I am and why I am passionate about community-based education. Even just, and I founded, on the day that I defended my dissertation, I announced in that defense that I was starting the community-based education movement.
Yeah.
So, because I'm passionate, and it's a movement. It's time for change in American education, and it's time. It's just time. And so I've been advocate of community-based learning for some years, but you know how it is. You gotta sometimes get that doctor title for people to start listening. So that was my goal and focus. All right, so let me just talk a little bit about community-based learning. Well, before I even just do that, I just want to talk a little bit about the kind of teacher that I was. I was a teacher who met students where they were. I'm a special ed teacher. When I started in special education, special ed was a place. So it was mainly just, you better keep them kids out the hallways type of situation. But for me, I came in to teach because I was a scholar as a kid. And so I had that kind of mindset. But I also came, to be honest, black boys are my muse. Like, that's who I want to. Based on what I grew up seeing in my household with my brothers being geniuses, but the streets got them anyway, I still always looked at black males as misguided warriors, and geniuses. And all of them have been my babies. I don't care. They're 6'8". They've all been my babies. And so, I've taught as a special education teacher, I've taught the kids who were the most challenged. So whether it was academically or behaviorally, I always had the class of the boys that were all black boys that were emotionally behavior labeled as, you know, bad kids in the building. But it was my role to be able to keep them in the classroom, and so I had to learn how to engage them quickly. They taught me how to be a good teacher because I had to learn how to engage them. All right, so I just wanted to share that a little bit about me. So, community-based learning, really quick. I'm not going to read through a lot, but the general definition of community-based learning is when instructional activities in the classroom are connected to what's happening in students' surrounding communities. There are 4 core types of community-based learning, and so the first one is instructional connections. You can think about like current events. It's just about having students just, you know, discuss something, be aware of what's happening out in the world. I'm more focused on the latter 3, which community integration is when resources from the community are brought into the school. Community participation is when students actually go out into the community, but all of these things are connected to what's happening in the classroom. My real vision and goal is focused on citizen action, and so that's when students are cultivating what's taking place in the classroom is directly connected to, I'm sorry, I looked at myself over there and got thrown off. Citizen action is when students, whatever is taking place in the classroom is actually cultivating them to be change agents, to change the world, okay? And so I found that this was the best way for me to try and change the world. I can't just do it all by myself, but if I can, you know, reach students and help empower them to be able to be change agents, then I can help to see more, you know, of the world moving towards that better place that I want for now my grandsons. Okay. All right. So now in my study, well, let me just talk a little bit before I even talk about my study. I just want to share a few examples of community-based learning, and also say in my study, my focus was on community being involved as a partner in the learning process. Okay, so it's not necessarily that first one where you're just, you know, exposing kids to community, which is a great start, you know, because at least it's something that's relevant. But I wanted to focus more on bringing the community in. Everybody's heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a child to raise a village. And so that's the part where I'm focused on, is using the village to educate the child so that the child could then develop and improve the village.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so some examples, I'm just going to read the first one, but the type of community-based learning that I want to see take place is where students are completing projects with professionals who actually use those standards in the classroom. So, you know, how many times have we heard students say, what does this have to do with the real world? Yeah. Community-based learning can answer that by bringing in people who use it in the real world. So like, for example, in a geometry class, you can bring in engineers and construction workers and fashion designers to talk about how to use geometry in their everyday lives. And we can also have them develop projects that the students can complete so that they're still addressing those academic skills, but they're also developing, you know, it's engaging. So it's not just me as a teacher saying, okay, I want to make sure you know a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Instead, now it's, you know, and then you just turn an assignment into me, I grade it and throw it in trash. Now, no, you're doing something that's actually going to develop the community, or at least is connected to the community. All right, so I'm not going to read through all of this, but I just want to say that community-based learning, some of the benefits include that it can be, not always, because remember that first level, it's just, you know, it's just exposing it, but the kind of community-based learning I'm talking about is student-centered. It's also experiential learning based. It includes higher order thinking skills. It's culturally sustaining. It develops 21st century and my own coined term third millennium skills. And it's also collaborative. So now I've given you all of that background. I'll talk about my study now. So the problem that prompted my study is that students are graduating from high school lacking 21st century skills. Employers are complaining about it. Colleges are complaining about it. Other post-secondary institutions are saying that students don't have these critical skills like critical thinking, creativity, cooperation, collaboration, communication. And so, but however, community-based learning, as you just saw on the other slide, can develop these 21st century skills. It's been shown to develop these 21st century skills. So But however, the problem is that it's not being used. Nobody's really using community-based learning. Just to show of hands, how many people, prior to yesterday, because I know some of you saw my poster, but prior to this conference, have you heard about community-based learning? Okay, yes. So that shows that it's not really something that's even talked about, let alone used in the classrooms. So the purpose of my study, because my goal is to transform education, my vision is to see as many community-based learning schools. My ultimate goal is to create community-based learning schools, but at least in the meantime, I want to transform classrooms and schools and districts into community-centered learning environments. But in order for me to do that, I need to first understand what are the barriers to this implementation. So the purpose of my study was to explore teachers' experience and perceived barriers to implementing community-based learning. So my research question was, what barriers prevent New York City public high school teachers from implementing community-based learning in the curriculum? So my theoretical framework was based on experiential learning, constructivism, the zone of proximal development, multiple intelligences theory, and culturally sustaining pedagogy. Because community-based learning, as you saw on some of the other slides, addresses all of those areas. This is my conceptual framework. So just a quick overview. Traditional instruction, that's, a teacher, the chalk and talk. A teacher just stands at the board, she's talking to you, or he's talking to you, and your students are just passively listening, okay? So that's the basic. Now, when community-based learning implementation is prevented, ultimately it leads to what I just talked about, the research shows, which is students are graduating lacking the 21st century skills that they actually need. However, when those barriers are removed and community-based learning is implemented in the classroom, ultimately students are able to graduate with developed 21st century skills. They're able to enter the workforce with developed 21st century skills. So my methodology, I conducted a qualitative phenomenological study. I used semi-structured interviews, and I conducted all of my interviews on the Zoom online conferencing platform. My setting was the New York City Department of Education, which is the largest school system in the nation, and it consists of over 1 million students and about 75,000 teachers, of which I interviewed 10. Yeah. So my sample size was small, but still, yes, it was qualitative. So my interview protocol, I created my own interview protocol because I wanted to make sure that I was consistent every time. And so it was like a checklist for me, but it also had some parts that were actually scripted so that I was consistent every time with every interview, just to make sure there was no, I didn't want that to be a factor in changing anything. So you've already seen these two slides. So I started off with sharing the general definition and those core types of community-based learning, but then I went on to the slide that showed the more study-specific definition with the rationale and those examples of the kind of community-based learning that I'm looking at those two levels, these two levels of the integration and the community participation. So I'll talk about the civic action in a little bit. I created an interview question flowchart so that I could interview teachers that had a lot of community-based learning experience or none at all. So I created it in a way that everyone started with the same first question, which was, have you ever implemented community-based learning into your curriculum? And so if they said yes, then I asked them, what were some of the barriers that you faced when implementing community-based curriculum? If they said no, then I said, well, have you ever thought about implementing community-based learning? So if they said yes to that, then I asked them, well, what might be some barriers that you would face with implementing it? And if they said no to that question, I said, well, based on getting some exposure right now, are you now interested in implementing community-based learning? And so if they said yes to that, then I would ask them, well, what might be some barriers that you would face? And if they said no, they're not interested, I would ask them, why aren't you interested? Because they may still identify some barriers. So for example, they may say, well, I'm not interested because I don't know what to do. I don't even know anything about it, and I don't think my principal will support me. So that would still give me information because those are barriers to its implementation. So my preparation for analysis, as as I said, I recorded on Zoom. So after each interview, I downloaded the audio recording as well as the transcript that Zoom creates. So for any researchers, you don't have to, listen and type up everything. Zoom will create a transcript for you, okay? So I downloaded both of those, and as I read through each transcript, I also listened to the audio recording and made any corrections to any mistranscriptions that the Zoom platform made. Then I sent it to the participant, had them look at the transcript and verify that everything was good. After that, then I printed the transcript, and then I began the analysis. And so I read the transcript and summarized any barriers that were identified, because it was open. And so teachers, a lot of times would just talk and talk and talk. So I had to, I only focused on the things that were identifying barriers according to their perspective. And it yielded 88 responses. And so I put those 88 responses on a spreadsheet and coded them for themes and ended up with 99 theme sets. So when I say theme sets, each response yielded a primary, secondary, and tertiary theme. Okay, so the primary themes were support and knowledge. So it was, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Lack and need were the secondary themes, and then the tertiary themes were the stakeholders that were mentioned, which were teachers, administrators, students, community partners, and other stakeholders. So for example, a teacher may have said, teachers need support from administrators. That's one barrier. Or they may have said, parents lack knowledge on what community-based learning is. So it would be up to administrators to provide that knowledge, okay? So there were, like I said, there were 88 different responses, but through my repetitive analysis over and over looking for themes, this is what emerged. So 63% of the responses directly correlated to support, and 36% were around knowledge. So this graph shows the support responses and specifically the stakeholders that were mentioned. So keep in mind it was only teachers who were interviewed, but they mentioned either lack of support or the need for support for teachers, administrators, students, community partners, as well as other stakeholders such as parents. So this, as you can see, and as to be expected, teachers would be the largest stakeholders to need or lack support. And also I just want to say that you can think of lack and need as being the same, but I wanted to keep them separate because it was a phenomenological study, and I wanted to keep that authenticity there as far as how the participants responded. Okay. And so the same for lack and need for knowledge. It was, again, teachers were the largest stakeholder group that were identified as lacking or needing knowledge, but then you can see also administrators, students, community partners, and other stakeholders were mentioned in this context as well. So one of the things that I found really interesting, which to me was just a confirmation of, community, is that every stakeholder needs knowledge from every stakeholder. This is what was identified in the study. And to me, it's like, it's just confirmation that we need to move into that community model that is not new, it's really traditional. It's really the original way. Like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It's the community, so we need to bring the community back in. And so for me, this was really an aha moment because it was like just a confirmation that we all need to be in this together. So my recommendations for practice, and for me as the founder of the community-based education movement, I am specifically focused on, as I said in the beginning, transforming education by helping educators learn how to implement community-based learning, but also supporting community partners in learning how to be a partner in the learning process. All right, so my recommendations for myself as well as any others who are, and I hope there will be millions in time, who are interested in this work, is to create training materials. This is it's not a brand new idea, but it is in the sense of American education. So there aren't really any training materials focused on community-based learning. So that would be a first, a core thing. But also just when I am working with, or when anyone is working with schools, you have to provide extensive training on this. It can't be just a quick little PD and then you think everybody's going to start implementing community-based learning. For those who are educators in the room, or really any industry, you know that you can't just have a PD and then that's it. And then you're just supposed to like do this new reform. You know, you really need support. And so that is the other part, the providing the ongoing support. So actually going into the schools and seeing how they're implementing it, providing feedback, providing guidance throughout this process until they are really solid. And it's about building a culture within a building. And so that's going to take time. It's not just something that's short. And then also offering courses at the college level that are centered in community-based learning. I am an adjunct professor as well. I forgot to say that part. But that is something that I would love to do, is create community-based learning courses and teach them, or train people, because I can't do it all, and that's something I already know. Like, so this is a movement, and that's why this is a movement, because you know I can't do everything, I can't do it all, but I'm willing to start it. You know, and so that those are the recommendations for practice. And then as far as recommendations for future research for anyone who is interested in continuing this research, you can replicate this in other cities, other states, even other countries, to identify what are the barriers that are present in those places. Also, you can disaggregate it, the data to be more specific around demographics. It can be based on race, it can be based on gender, it can be based on age, it can be based on years of experience in the classroom, years of experience with community-based learning. Also conducting this qualitative study with the stakeholders who are involved and seeing what are the barriers that they face. So that can be the administrators, that can be the community members themselves. And then also on a quantitative level, this study can be replicated. The findings from the study can be used by creating, for example, a survey that's like asking how many teachers agree that knowledge and support are barriers to implementing. And then it can be implemented on a very massive level in that way. And then also, there needs to just be more studies as it's continuing to be implemented, studies on its effectiveness. As far as, for me, one of my motivations for community-based learning is because it's engaging to students, but it can't just be engaging. Like, schools don't care about that. It has to actually work. You know, it has to result in test scores. And for me, like, I have, you know, the test scores to show that this works, but it's just me, and it wasn't, you know, the data besides my test scores, but I don't have, you know, now I need to be more specific in showing that this model works. And so that kind of, so studies qualitatively as well as quantitatively need to be conducted. And then I do have a call to action for everyone, and I'm going to give out cards as well, but I would love for you all to join the community-based education movement. Everyone can be a member of the community-based education movement. As I said, it's not just for teachers, but it's for everyone in the community, so that you can learn how you can be a partner in the process, or how you can support in other ways. So even if you don't necessarily want to directly interact with the students, you can spread the word on your social media. You can donate, you know, to the cause. So there are other ways, and by going to my website, you'll be able to learn more about that. Okay. Give one more moment for that. And also, just at the bottom of every slide, for anyone who hasn't taken pictures, I don't know if it will actually show up, but I do have two websites. So this website down at the bottom of every slide is the ifedamon.com website. And then on the next page, I do have another QR code for my other. Okay, and then this one is, if you're just interested in my complete dissertation, then you can scan this code and access my complete dissertation. Okay, and the website for the movement is cbemovement.com. So please consider going to the website, creating a free account. It's completely free, doesn't cost you anything. And you can learn more about how you can be a partner in the process of helping raise the child and the village together. Again, my name is Dr. Ife Damon, and I thank you all for your time.